Today's video is addressed to English teachers again, and it's about transparency and washback. We're going to look at that further on. What you see is an image of a seashell, a photo I took many years back in Thailand when I began compiling my ebook. And so, what do seashells have to do with English grammar? Well, if grammar is to be more intrinsic than prescriptive, we need to parallel how language might be like the spiraling of seashells' growth. The same goes for how we communicate and teach English. Obviously, changes to modern languages are influenced by both prescriptive and intrinsic aspects, and many more have come about by both mishearings and misconveying of a language. But teaching, if it is to be more effective, should be more natural than prescriptive. So obviously I draw a parallel in my work with how new scientific discoveries are reshaping how we view mechanics, geometry, and mathematics today, which are redefining the sciences and showing to be productive. In like manner, the new chart I've devised in my ebook suggests how virtually all the aspects of traditional grammar may be reshaped to better portray our language. In my 25 years of English teaching, the last 12 of which I have been synthesizing linguistically backed grammar analyses, I'm convinced that I'm portraying English as it actually works, rather than limiting it to a series of rules. All the data I've compiled in the cloud for this ebook is, like growing seashells, coral, and other natural organisms, a work in progress. And although my students and former students who have access to this for a lifetime, until death do us part, I like to say, they can see my developments in almost real time. I'm looking to find educators and linguists as well as programmers willing to collaborate in order to sustain English as the lingua franca. We will need to boost the level of fluency of English to a level that goes beyond mediocrity, intermediacy. My book proposes novel ways of imparting knowledge of English in innovative ways and reveals facets of English that have been shown to be linguistically more accurate and yet are not really in the current mainstream course books and curricula. I have over 2,000 files in the cloud, along with the purchase of the condensed form, which is already over 290 pages. So I feel it's high time that there be serious efforts made to improve how we deliver English more transparently. The chart you see here shows in the left column flawed or ambiguous nomenclature. In the middle, you see the functional explanatory approach to these. So when you purchase my book, you'll also be able to access the green links, the internal links, for details of each of these. I'll just go through this with you. You can see it here. There are more than 17 in this chart. And if you're interested in having a debate or a discussion about these, it would be really well worth your while joining me on Discord. I've made a group for that. I should hope teachers will join me there. So, first and foremost, English is not Latin, although it borrows words and expressions from Latin. Second, labeling terminology should not be the rationale itself for justifying a particular grammatical aspect of the language, as it's neither revealing nor explanatory. Actually, usually it justifies explaining away something. Third, providing rules and equivalent exceptions does not equate to greater fluency. And that's where we come to washback further on. Then the other aspects of English phenomena that current mainstream textbooks avoid, I've already produced videos on these. So backshifting, simplification, and many others. So the compilation I have is what I consider a gem. Let's have a look at washback. It's a term in pedagogy which I describe in my own words as a failure of the language learner to actively acquire and produce or deliver the target language, mainly due to their not having been adequately exposed to accurate descriptions in the classroom and or course curricula. The argument for that, in my view, is principally that teachers' inability to adequately and accurately convey the target language due to hesitation or lack of having been provided the linguistic explanations where needed, more than a possibly inadequate methodology. The pretense that grammar is not important or relevant because a course may be focusing on conversation, often excuses for actually not delving into the language itself. The learner is hardly to blame. So let's take the so-called phrasal verb, as I've done in previous videos, to illustrate my point. And I'm not making an effort here to illustrate this in a scholarly fashion. Academics feel they should have to prove. A simple result extracted from the Oxford English Vocabulary Profile corpus will show that intermediate level learners sitting an actual English exam actually only produced a limited output of phrasal verbs, both in spoken and written discourse. Will offer plenty of lexis, albeit I say limited because I'm certain that the mainstream course books using inaccurate or else vague approaches to the grammar. Note that there are only 9 phrasals in all, and 5 of those are with. This shows that learners are not actually able to deliver more than that aspect of the language to the degree that they could. That list, in my view, is evident of Washback, as intermediate learners should be able to produce many more phrasals given how frequently they are used in English. So at a level of A1, A2, I was surprised to find that these particular phrasals were missing from the Oxford list. Of course, this could mean that lower level learners will have either gotten them wrong or mixed up, which is not surprising since most of the above are similar looking, and given that 4 of them are with look. That they would never have been exposed to them, however, is less likely, which in my opinion should clue us in on the fact that it is the linguistic explanations that students are questioning the validity of grammar analysis. And rightly so. After all, would you not hesitate to implement chunks of language that are not properly explained in accordance with valid syntax? We were looking at how verbs have several functions and in any case several meanings. The semantics are broad, and this is separate whether these have a particle attached to them. And that's because the particle, which is generally not attached to the verb itself, it is the hesitation rather than procrastination, as some teachers will claim, I'm sure, that it produces washback. We may assume the following. ESL teachers neglected to insist they be used on the exam, which I somehow doubt, seeing that teachers are encouraged to do so. It's more likely that they're taking the wrong approach and getting learners to rote memorize so-called phrasal verbs in the hopes that they will. That produces backwash. Why learners will not have been taught the importance of transitive and intransitive and ditransitive in the meantime is another question. Teaching false grammar rules based on false analyses leads to backwash, which is an intellectual barrier and valid grounds for student procrastination. Here's a scenario. Learners asking, why do I say it wrong even after I studied and understood the rules for a given grammar point? My answer is that taking a lexical semantic approach to language learning will alleviate the anxiety of grammar. If only you understood that attached to each word are neuron-like particles that dictate how it should be used in a given context. You may relax and let the learning process come as naturally as when you learn your mother tongue. Even native speakers are less likely to understand the rules of their own language, let alone phrasals, which is an invented term, because they've learned it the natural way without the need for formal rules. So why should it be any different for learners? The hang-ups, complex and stress, comes from you're associating a language as being foreign. Moreover, non-native speakers, especially adults, feel a need to have rules and structured explanations and logic while rejecting the illogical and rebelling against any fun, more abstract and idiomatic aspects of learning and language. Yet language is an art. It isn't maths or physics or anything theoretical for that matter. Furthermore, human communication is not just pragmatism, but also the need for expressing irelia, the hypothetical, and relating past context, and the per se, use my Latin. We need to learn to recognize the semantic value for each word, along with its potentially multiple concepts according to each given context, even if it means creating your own abstract, absurd methods for learning it, since when it actually comes to producing a given chunk of language in spoken discourse, you won't be looking to recall the rules at that point. So for instance, for and since have so many different usages, and yet when we are content to know the two rules, we still get it wrong when it comes to speaking. And so there we go. We have the examples of backwash in the book. And also there's reference to my methodology, which I've also covered in another video. Negative washback could externalize, among other things, as fossilized learner errors generate semi-consciously from having sat a bad exam or having been taught with outmoded educational methods, dated curricula. Even the current methodology and explanations are outdated or flawed or vague. As an overall bitterness or rebelliousness within a school environment from a sense of disconnect and discomfort from one's own real world experiences. So that's just about it for today's video. Thanks for watching, and please subscribe and have a look at my preface and table of contents to the ebook. I'm sure you'll find good reason to go ahead and make a purchase. Thanks for joining.